أهلا بك يا سيدنا. في الأول هستأذن يفتك سيدنا، يعني أبونا متياس هيعمل بس مقدمة صغيرة يشرح فيها للناس اللي هي بتتكلم إنجليزي إن في ترجمة ليهم، وبعد كده ناخد برك نفس. أبونا متياس، you can start أبونا.
Thanks, Sayed. Just as a quick announcement, and for anyone who has not participated in any of the meetings before, the sermon is going to be in Arabic, but for those who would like to listen to it in English, you can select the interpretation icon in Zoom, which looks like a globe, and you can select English as your language of choice. And as long as you're selected English, you'll hear Father Maurice speaking in English, interpreting the words of Sayyidina. And then as far as asking questions, so questions are only accepted at the end when His Grace has allowed the questions to be asked. So the way you ask questions is that you click on the raise hand icon, which is in the participants window. So please don't raise your hand until it's time for the questions at the end, or else your hand will be, the hand will be lowered automatically. Just wait until it's time for questions, and then you can raise the hand. Some of you, when you register, it says that you can submit questions by sending email to admin, the admin email for the SUS COPS, but please don't do this. Instead, just submit the question only through raising the hand. That's the only way that we'll be receiving questions. Thank you so much.
سيدنا الحبيب، احنا من كل قلبنا فرحانين جدا جدا.
We're very happy to be with you and to have your grace with us today.
أنا عارف سيدنا الوقت ده قد إيه صعب على نيافتك، خصوصا نيافتك يعني سكرتير المجمع المقدس، والأسبوع الجاي.
How difficult it is for your grace to be with us today, especially since you are the secretary of the synod, especially preparing for the meeting next week with all the things that we're going to be doing next week with the synod, including the consecration of the maroon oil and the ordinations. It's because of your love towards us, Sayyidina, and you're going to bless us and teach us with your spirituality and your experience. For those who don't know, I love Sayyidina very much. He was my teacher in the past and my Sunday school teacher, and I'm still learning from him, and I am blessed to have him as my teacher. He taught me hymns and many, many lessons, and today I'm very, very happy that Sayyidina is with us today. I hope you all enjoy the time that we're spending now with His grace. For Sayyidina is filled with many, many gifts, including hymns and dogma and the rest of the church. I hope this continues with other meetings in the future as well, Sayyidina. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. Glory to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and forever, to the age of all ages, Amen. I don't deserve the kind words that your grace just said. I am blessed and I'm honored to be with you all. I can't forget the love that you have for me, Sayyidina. I want to say that I'm envious of your congregation that have your grace with them and the Southern Diocese, and all the effort and the work that your grace does, and all the traveling that you do, which is a witness of your service in front of everyone. I'm happy to meet with you on Zoom. At least that's a way of visiting each other, as if we are traveling to each other in less than minutes. I hope that the future inventions of traveling would be as quick as Zoom. Thank you so much for this invitation, Sayyidina. And I learned from your grace as well, and from many servants as well. I hope that servants also express themselves as well. I encourage all the servants to express themselves and to share their learnings as well and their ideas. And Bishop just said that we also have Bishop Gregory and Bishop Basil with us. Sayyidina is saying that we're waiting for Bishop Gregory and Bishop Basil for this synod meeting next week. We are preparing to make the Mayroon oil next week with the gathering all of the synod and the ordination. And I'm sure His Grace Bishop Yusuf already told the bishops all the plans that we have for next week. Let us read from Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6, verse 1. We're going to read Luke 6 from verse 1. Now it happened on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the grain fields, and his disciples plucked the heads of grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. And some of the Pharisees said to them, "Why are you doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath?" But Jesus answering them said, "Have you not even read this, what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him? How he went into the house of God, took and ate the showbread, and also gave some to those with him, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat. And he said to them, The Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath." Now it happened on another Sabbath also that he entered the synagogue and taught, and a man was there whose right hand was withered. So the scribes and Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. But he knew their thoughts, and said to the man who had the withered hand, "Arise and stand here." And he arose and stood. Then Jesus said to them, "I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, or to save life or to destroy?" And when he had looked around at them all, he said to the men, "Stretch out your hands." And he did so, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. But they were filled with rage and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. Here I wanted to comment on how the Jewish people always had accusation and criticism of Christ in both stories that we just discussed. The issue here is how Christ reacted to these criticisms. Christ here did not show anger or sadness to their accusations or their criticism. First, I want to start by saying that criticism starts from three different reasons, three different kinds. The first type comes from when people have different perspective and different opinions about their beliefs. We can call this type those who are enemies to us. And this is the easiest kind to describe because we could explain the reason why they are having criticism, because they have different perspective and different opinions. The second type of criticism is a more difficult type, are those who have the same belief as us. For example, St. Paul and the Jewish people. They are both Jewish people, and he lived in the Jewish culture, and he called himself a Pharisee. But when he believed in Christ, he started to have an open mind. But the first people that fought him were the Jewish people. The first people were the Christian people that came from a Jewish background. So even though they have the same culture and the same upbringing and they are fellow workers, they're the ones that criticized him. And that could be because of envy towards him or very close-minded approach of how they think towards St. Paul. The third type is the most difficult type. The third type really talks about or discusses the idea of those who are very close to us and those who are serving with us, and when they criticize, it feels like a betrayal to us. This kind of criticism, especially when it happens with no logic, becomes very difficult on us because we assume that they are our closest allies. Let me just say that difference of opinions is very common in all of humanity. So, for example, the story of Abraham and Lot. Abraham left his father and took Lot with him, and Abraham was his uncle, and they left together, and they worked together, and they have traveled long distances together, and they shared everything. And once they prospered together, and they had problems together. So they are fellow workers together, they are relatives together, they worship together, believe in the one God, and they followed God's will to leave their people. And even though they still ran into an issue, a problem that took place between each other. So how did Abraham deal with the issue? He said, we are brothers. Abraham said, we are brothers, even though he is his uncle. He said, let us not have arguments between one another. Let us not fight between one another. I said, why are we fighting? Just look around you, and pick whatever you want, and you can choose whatever you want.
فده نوع من الخلاف اللي فيه نوع من الغيرة.
This is a type of argument or criticism to one another that comes from very close relatives. Same also is an example between Joseph and his brothers. They're all brothers and they're all very close to each other. But when envy comes between them, they start making fun of Joseph and they start criticizing Joseph. And they had many negative feelings towards Joseph. And then they betrayed him and they sold him and so forth.
والمشاكل الكثيرة جدا في حياته.
Which caused many problems in the life of Joseph. I want to talk to you why the servants criticize, or why the servants are being criticized. What are the reasons for criticism? Sometimes when a servant changes very quickly, and that disturbs other people. And sometimes this approach, because he or she want to go very quickly and to serve very quickly and make changes quickly, has an impact on other people. Let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story about my service, for example. When I was first ordained a bishop, I went to Girga, which is a diocese in Upper Egypt. I fall into that mistake. I saw many problems, so I was eager to fix the problem very quickly. I fell into that issue because I acted very quickly. I didn't clarify my vision. I didn't clarify the steps that I want to do. When people felt that there's a change right away, this quick eagerness of change can show or can have others criticize the servant by this approach.
في هذا التغيير أو في العمل اللي بيقوم به. طبعا مفيش عمل كامل.
And maybe this approach is incomplete. But of course, when you have cooperation between everyone and one does something and the other person completes the other part and so forth, so the work becomes more complete that way. But if there's only one person that's spearheading the service, then of course there will be many flaws and others are not filling those flaws or fixing those flaws.
القائد أو ينتقد الخادم نفس الرؤية للمستقبل التي يكون للخادم.
And sometimes people who criticize the servant are people that don't have the same vision as the servant. And this is a problem with the servant because he or she did not clarify his approach and didn't develop enough consensus between other people so they can move together.
أو في مشكلة عند بعض الخدام.
Sometimes there's a problem with some of the servants, and it could be a psychological or an emotional problem. The servant is not clear. Sometimes a servant hides some of this information to have a higher power or authority over other people. So I know a servant, for example, if he's responsible for a specific aspect of his service, a coordinator, for example, would come and start to explain, but so basically the story is, if let's say a servant is responsible for something specific and then a coordinator starts talking about a specific service, and once the coordinator is done, the servant would bring a whole plan that he has planned for the service, and all throughout he's just sitting around not speaking and not speaking up during the time that the coordinator is talking. So basically there could be a psychological issue here where this servant feels like he needs to be in charge and that he has planned everything accordingly. And sometimes there's a flaw or an issue where the servant feels that he has special talents that others don't have, for example. And sometimes a servant receives a specific information that he's not sharing with other people, and based on those information he makes decisions, and other people would criticize because they don't know that information. So again, it's up to the servant to clarify and to bring people on board and to share his vision before he starts acting.
بيبصها من الخارج القائد أو الخادم مش شايفها.
Again, sometimes they have different perspectives, and a person from an external perspective versus an internal perspective of the church or of the service.
الناس تحس إنه مش محتاجين إلى الخادم، الدنيا ماشية مش محتاجة قائد حلوة، لكن عند الأزمات يقولوا القائد هو السبب، يلبسوه هو المشكلة.
When things are going well in a church, for example, they say, well, we don't need that priest or we don't need that leader. But when a problem happens, everybody starts criticizing the leader or the priest or the servant. We have an example, for example, in the Bible about Moses. So Moses was instructed to take the Jewish people out of Egypt, and people were upset. They were upset for being a slave in Egypt. So they accepted Moses, and they accepted going away with Moses out of Egypt. And they saw an amazing miracle of the Red Sea and parting of the sea. But once they crossed the other side and they felt the security and they felt safe that they're not in danger in front of the Egyptians, they start criticizing Moses. Then they said, we want to eat. So we're going to only eat bread. We want meat as well. We want to drink. There's no water. So Moses brought water out of a rock and so forth. And they kept on criticizing Moses, even though they lived a good life and they had food and water. And they start criticizing, is Moses the only one that God talked to? And they criticized the priesthood of Aaron as well. And they said, why is it just them that are doing the priestly duties? And then Miriam, the sister of Moses, started criticizing Moses and how he married someone outside of the Jewish people. And this all happened even though they saw Moses when he talked to God and how he received the 10 Commandments, and he saw the glory of his presence in front of God. And Moses and God was with Moses in everything that he did, and he made him successful. But this still did not, but this still continued, and people still criticized Moses, even from his closest relatives, like his brother or his sister.
دايما القائد يتوقع انه لازم ينتقد.
All the leaders have to expect that they will be criticized.
لو استخدم السلطة كثيرا يعطي عدم ثقة وكراهية.
Especially if he uses an authority, it gives a sense of insecurity. The leader has to use the talent of discussion and conversation and convincing other people rather than use an authoritative approach. And of course, in any society, we have people that are envious, and there are people that see the black dot and they don't see anything positive. They always look at the negative and they criticize the negative. Even though a servant could have done a lot of work, but they see only the negative things of that servant. So they're being unfair. They focus on the negative point and forget about all the positives. Criticism is the easiest approach to judge people. It's very easy to look at the negatives. A lot more difficult compared to someone that actually does the positive and works and serves. Criticism is easy.
وزي ما قرينا في انجيل لوقا المسيح كانوا ينتقدوا اليهود وكان بيرد عليهم وكان بيستخدمها انه يثبت لهم حقائق. عشان كده مهم جدا ان احنا نتعامل مع النقد.
That's why it's very important for us to learn how to deal with criticism.
الخادم ينبغي ان يسمع هذا النقد ويتعايش معه ولا يتجاهله.
It's important for the servant to listen to the criticism and to look at it that this might be beneficial for me. This criticism is actually good because it humbles the servant. Woe to all the servants if everyone says that you're doing a great job. You become very easy and very susceptible to falling into pride. It becomes very easy for any devil to strike you with pride. And this makes it an easy battle for the devil to fight the servant. But if you are criticized, it's a humbling experience for the servant. So this humbling experience helps the servant to continue to stay humble. I encourage the servant not to take the criticism in a personal way. Don't approach it from a very objective perspective, not a personal perspective. If you take it from a personal perspective, you feel like others hate you and they're trying to put you down. No, this is not the right approach. Take the criticism from an objective perspective. Look at what people are saying. Maybe they have some truth to what they're saying. Maybe I should change my approach. Maybe I should listen to what they're saying. Maybe I should have a conversation with them to learn more about what they're saying. The servant ought to listen and to analyze and to assess what the people are saying and give them an excuse. Maybe there's truth to what they're saying. And the servant should not feel down, even if they hear that they're doing something wrong. They shouldn't fall into depression, especially if the feedback or the criticism from those who are very close to him or to her. Sometimes a servant would hear a criticism or a feedback, and all of a sudden they say that I'm a failure. So this failure could be something that I could fix and I could be successful, or it could bring me down and I could fall into depression. I explained Joseph, for example. Joseph failed with his brothers and failed with Potiphar and failed in prison. These are all failures, but all of this was ways for him to be successful in the future. And he learned from all these lessons. So don't let that feedback or criticism make you fall into depression. Maybe God allowed this feedback so you can fix the problem that you are facing. And don't let this criticism make you feel like you're fed up with the service or fed up with the church. So if people criticize me because I go and visit them, or they criticize me when I read the Bible or when I serve them, so maybe the best approach is just for me to stop serving because I'm tired, I'm sick and tired of their approach. So maybe the best thing is just to go to sleep and relax. Of course, that's not right. So this criticism has pushed me to escape and to run and to flee, which is not right. And it puts the servant down and puts the zeal of the servant down. But feedback should definitely make me grow and should make me learn from my mistakes and continue to keep my zeal. I have to search the truth behind the criticism. I have to think about it. Are people afraid of change? Are people not quite understanding what I'm trying to do? Maybe I didn't explain it well enough. Maybe they don't know what the target is or the goal of what I'm doing. Maybe the person that's criticizing me is a person that I upset in the past. Maybe this is their way of retaliation towards me because I upset them in the past. Maybe it's a person that I upset, and this person is waiting for me to fall into any problem to criticize me. So that means that I have to apologize to this person and to fix what caused this criticism to begin with. Maybe it's through envy, or maybe it's through competition. And maybe people like to have division. And maybe people don't know how to live in love towards other people and companionship.
فيضيع وسطيهم يبقى واحد من ضمن فيعمل انقسام عشان خاطر يظهر او عشان خاطر يبقى له هو.
Sometimes people push division in any service so they can feel that they are important or they can stand out. Of course, this needs a spiritual healing and spiritual solution, and that means a priest should sit with them by themselves to understand where they're coming from. How do I deal with criticism? First, don't retaliate with the same level of criticism. Someone criticizes me, then I criticize them back. Someone says something, you did something wrong, I retaliate and say, you don't understand what you're doing, you're saying. Of course, this is an escalation. And of course, this is not going to lead to finding a solution. How I deal with criticism first, I have to be humble and with love. That's how I deal with criticism. And holding on to the truth. If someone criticizes me and there is truth to what they're saying, say, this is the truth, you're right. You're right. When I humble myself like this, the person calms down and becomes humble as well. As long as that's the truth, of course. Of course, I don't retaliate and I don't take it personal. And I don't retaliate with one criticism. I give him back two criticisms. I will lose this person and I'll lose him forever. But with love and humility and with discussions and conversation, just like Christ did with the Jewish people, and ask them questions. And if they don't answer, he answers. Also, don't let your emotions your emotions be out of hand and make you feel like you hate the person because they criticized you. And then, of course, once your feelings start to go out of hand, you might yell and scream and react in a negative way, and with being angry towards the person and not being objective. I would like to say something important. If the person is criticizing you is If the person that's criticizing you's main objective is to divide the relationship and to cause division, don't let yourself be the reason for that division by your reaction to his criticism. And sometimes, sadly, if someone is upsetting me, I go and I get other people to attack him as well. I create almost like a group of people to fight him, and they, of course, create a group as well, and they fight. The first group fights the second group, and then group fight against another group, and they start fighting against each other. And everybody starts getting evidence from the Bible and the teachings of the church and the history of the church, and they retaliate. And sometimes the issue has nothing to do with any of these things. And it really comes down to pride and the I in this equation. And the retaliation is just to feed that pride. I want to say in summary, I want the criticism to be something that's positive. It actually builds people. It's okay if we do it in an objective way, in a loving way, in a humble way, to give feedback to someone. And I don't get upset if others do the same thing with me, because I get to benefit. People's criticism or feedback is actually good for me. And sometimes God speaks on their behalf. So I can learn, so I can grow. So I can benefit spiritually by being humble to receive that feedback and to learn and to experience and to learn a new experience. May God bless your service and make it prosperous, and for all of us to accept all of the feedback. It's enough that you are serving with beautiful priests and beautiful bishop like Amba Yusuf, and his success is evident in everywhere in the diocese, and which you all know how Sayyidina travels and serves so many places. Even though lots of you might be receiving criticism, but may God bless your service and bless all of your endeavors. I hope we can see all of you in Egypt one day. Thank you so much for this time.